This is the Under the Ring Report. And now, the guys who make wrestling podcasting too sweet. John the Flesh Wound and Cousin Tom.
Welcome, wrestling fans, to the Under the Ring Report. Thanks a lot for subscribing to the show. With me, Cousin Tom. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I can't complain. I guess you're kind of enjoying the outdoor weather, aren't you?
I am. It's a nice 85, 86 degrees in Southern Illinois this week, and no rain in sight. Should be a nice weekend.
That's good, and hey, what the hell? Wrestling's not worth watching, really, so... Except for coming up, New Japan. But other than that, everything else is kind of status quo. So we talked about different topics. We can sit there and talk about everything WWE's doing, but we both agree right now we're not really paying attention. It's kind of a boring thing going on. But it's also kind of cool once in a while to look back at things that have happened in the world of professional wrestling. And we chatted, and I think it'd be kind of cool to talk about things that have happened in the history of professional wrestling that we would have hoped didn't happen, and then maybe our alternate universe would be what would have happened instead. You cool with that?
Yeah, I follow you.
Okay.
We're gonna create the alternate timeline, like what's that show, The Flash, where it has 30 timelines and nobody knows what the heck's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing, or like the Avengers. So
exactly,
you could kind of do the same thing right there. Our own little alternate reality of what may have happened in professional wrestling. I'll go first, and being that I've always been probably more of a WCW fan than I have WWE, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because in that late 90s era, it was kind of cool to watch the guys I grew up with and see that they were still relevant on TV. And also the product that WWE at that time was putting out was pretty bad,
Right.
But I would go back and I would change the timeline so that WCW never got bought by WWE, because we've heard all the stories of how this company might do this company might do that. And in my mind, I think if WCW had been able to be picked up by somebody with a brain and used for the way it should have been, I think they could have still been competing with WWE. But I think that they would give WWE a quality opponent for professional wrestling, because right now, Ring of Honor, New Japan, they're okay, but they're not at the same level, even close to being the same level. So to me,
just think about the competition when the two were hot. I mean, that was must-see TV on both parts.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, Monday nights. What did you do on Monday nights?
Well, at the time, I VCR'd one and watched the other.
Yeah. But I mean, that was like the highest TV ratings for professional wrestling all the time that wrestling had been around. I mean, even Raw hasn't even come close to hitting those type of ratings, even by itself.
Right.
But as we talk about what we'd like to see happen, I would go back. And in my mind, what I would do, really, first of all, doesn't have anything to do with WCW. I would have made sure that the Time Warner AOL merger never happened. So
yeah, that really messed a lot of things up, because it went from being solely Ted Turner to it was a corporate decision, and all they were was either in the red or in the black.
Mm-hmm.
Just no one cared, and it changed everything.
Oh yeah, and you know what? They didn't want that wrestling show on their stuff, but I think that in the timeline, if you change that, just that little piece, I think Eric Bischoff stays in control. They may cut back on some of the stuff they're doing, but I don't think we get to the point where Russo has turned loose on that program and completely just...
Oh, Lord.
Oh, I know.
Bro.
I mean? Oh, bro. Yeah, that's right, bro. But I give Russo credit. He had a lot to do with how WWE and the Attitude Era. He did. He had a lot to do, and he's given us a lot of credit. But by himself, with no one buffering him, WCW was a freaking nightmare. I mean, you think of all the crazy crap that they did, and I can't even believe some of that stuff made it on TV. I would see none of that stuff happened. None of it. And you know what?
Yeah.
I think at that time, in my mind, because WCW was a little bit ahead of its time, they had a power plant where they were training guys to come in and learn. WWE wasn't...
That sounds familiar.
That's right. But you think about it, WWE really wasn't doing that right off the bat. Later on, they had Ohio Valley and they started to learn to do that stuff. But Bill Goldberg came through the power plant, So
Right.
That's a perfect example of what type of star they could produce if they were given a chance to gather enough of those people. And I think if that had been the case, the sky's the limit back then. I think they would have been a neck-and-neck competitor with WWE. And know what? We may have still had 2 shows on the air.
Yeah, it was a huge difference when there was 2 major shows and not the way it is now where one dominates because of the lack of competition, basically.
True.
But when there were 2 shows, you also had options for the talent. So,
very true.
You know, if things weren't working out to your liking and you could get out of your contract, you may have to wait a few months before you get back on television, but you knew, okay, I'm going to have to relocate either northeast or southern part of the United States, but I'm gonna have a job.
Well,
and
the one thing
that was
too,
that was one of the best things about Monday nights was there was always those surprises that would pop up.
Yes, that was it right there. I was hoping you'd say that because that I think's made everybody want to watch. Because was so and so going to show up here, or was so and so going to show up here? I think after Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, that became the norm of Monday Night TV for wrestling.
Well, one of the most famous was Six got fired from WCW and then shows up immediately within a week on WWE Network and cuts a promo on Eric Bischoff. And, it's like, oh man, I mean, that the glue hadn't even dried on the FedEx envelope that he received. So that was one of the many things.
Well, and Rick Rude showing up on both programs,
Right.
Because back in the day, they taped Raw, and for Rude to show up, and then when he comes out and joins the NWO, he shaves his beard to show people that it's different from what you're seeing that was taped 2 weeks ago. And I mean, you don't see that stuff anymore. I mean, Jericho might be the closest we have, but it's not even close to the type of competition back then. And I think that would have changed a lot of the superstars you see now, maybe even changed the styles of wrestling that is happening right now, just because WWE, when they won, they got to change the narrative of all history. Everybody does that. You know what I mean? You change how things are. Your guy is better than theirs, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? The whole narrative.
Not only that, but after that happened, then if you remember, they kind of struggled because you had so many years of competition, us and them.
Yep.
When they weren't there, they had to create another invasion angle with ECW that really didn't exist just to try to have something creative to work with.
It was a nightmare, pretty much. I mean, I don't know how you screw up probably the easiest storyline in the world to write, but they figured out a way to completely screw the WCW invasion thing up. And I think if they had been still separate entities, we still would have been enjoying it. I don't know if they would have had as much wrestling on, may have backed off, but I mean, I miss that type of competition. And like I said, I know there's a New Japan. I know Impact is trying, so is Ring of Honor, but they're not even close to the same level. We have a lot more wrestling available to us, which is cool, but not at the same level as a WCW versus WWF.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, I'm going to give you, I was thinking about this, and here's one that I would like to change.
Okay.
And that would be Kansas City pay-per-view when Owen Hart falls to his death.
Yeah.
I loved Owen, even as a heel. Would have loved it, kept him alive. Part of the reason I wanted to change that is because a lot of people forget WCW had a deal with The Tonight Show. And there was one night where Hogan and Bischoff pretty much took over the Jay Leno's Tonight Show desk for most of the show. And people forget about that. And it was actually, this is when people read the newspapers, but I can still remember being on my lunch hour and I went to pick up lunch at McDonald's, wherever, and looking at the USA Today, and there's a full, half-page ad, and it was Bret Hart versus Kevin Nash on the Tonight Show. But it just so happened it was going to be the day, it was going to be the Monday night after the pay-per-view in Kansas City when Owen got killed.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so that's why Bret was in California when it happened and then had to fly back. So there is a whole nother, there's a whole nother thing that could have happened there where if nothing happened to Owen, you've got those guys on the Tonight Show. Talk about major exposure
that would have been
professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would have been huge. And so maybe that changes the outcome of WCW. So it kind of ties into your point. But then also you got Owen. If Owen's still around, think about all the guys he never had a chance to work with.
Oh, yeah.
The Eddie Guerreros and Chris Benoit's and Chris Jericho and those type of guys that, you knew he could work with pretty much anybody. And so there's a whole nother, I always think we kind of missed out because I think he had his best years were still ahead of him. But because of the silly gimmick they had him doing at the time and that type of stuff, it didn't work out. And then also Bret Hart's career changes and maybe he doesn't become such a, I don't want to sound, put Bret Hart down because, his brother died, but, he got really bitter and mad for a long time.
Yeah. Very true.
And
he had a lot. He had a lot he was dealing with. I mean,
yeah, a lot, huge. And so pretty much every interview or promo turned into an angry shout fest, because of it. And so his whole thing changes too. But yeah, that would be the one I was thinking of. It was the Owen Hart incident.
It's funny because as you talk about that was something that was part of that's kind of where I was thinking too, is if I could change history, I would go before that. I don't think any of that stuff happens if Bret Hart doesn't leave WWE, because if he's still there, does he let Owen do that? Is Owen even doing those things? Because the Hart Foundation is still there. There's still a major heel group. That's some of the things you have to look at too. Maybe if Vince had enough money and things hadn't been the way they were, if Bret stays there, the course of WWE probably changes in a whole other direction. I don't know how the Attitude Era would have all worked itself out, but I have a feeling that the Hart Foundation would have been a major part of it, and I don't see Owen Hart breaking away from that group and doing the silly gimmick with the blue blazer at all. But I think that all comes down to if he had stayed there and Vince had been able to afford him, things would have been a lot different. And I think Bret Hart probably would have been looked at in a different light. I think that unfortunately for him, his time in WCW kind of tarnished him a little bit. And it had a lot more to do with they didn't know what to do with him. And you mentioned too, the problems with his brother dying and stuff had a lot to do with it also. But I think if that had been switched up and he'd stayed there, he would have been looked at a totally different way than he had been for those years where he was really bitter and mad before his reconciliation.
Yeah, there's so many things, and that's doing an episode like this. There's so many things that are interconnected that when you start to think about it, it's like if we just change this one thing, this, and this may, could have happened. And that's kind of what's neat about talking about this is it just opens the door for one thing after another, especially with the Hearts. Maybe they drop the goofy Canada versus USA gimmick and do something else. Who knows? But yeah, that was one guy. That was a tragic accident that I wish would have never happened.
All righty. Well, let's see here. If I have to think about something else, it goes probably to one of my favorite groups. And I know I'm sticking mostly to WCW stuff, but if you ask me, I don't let the finger poke of doom happen in WCW because you know what, the NWO was kind of whatever, but I think that stuff there was like the final, just push it over the top. We're over, whatever you want to say. They jumped the shark. I think that was the one singular moment to me where WCW finally said, we don't give a shit. So, why do you do that with a title like they had and let Nash just lay down for Hogan?
I thought you were going David Arquette.
Well, we don't need to talk about that because that's an easy thing. Everybody goes after that.
No, that's where I thought you were going at first. That's why I laughed when you said the finger poke of doom.
No. I always look at that. To me, the finger poke of doom is the start of the end of WCW to me.
Well, that's the one that just says, okay, we're going to swerve everybody. We don't care. Kayfabe's dead. All you fans that paid good money thinking you're going to see a title match with Goldberg and Nash. Guess what, suckers?
Yeah.
It's not happening. And instead, you're going to get it. You're going to see this happen. And, can you imagine paying money and sitting in that crowd? And I know everyone always says, well, we're trying to generate heat and, get people talking. Yeah, but to what effect are you trying to get people talking?
And you know what? By that time, the NWO had kind of run its course, because didn't we have two different factions at that time? And
it was the red and black and the black and white.
And it had gotten to the point that nobody cared about the NWO because if they hadn't split them apart and added every freaking idiot in the back room to the group, they wouldn't have been in that situation. But I think at that point to me was where I'm just like, I'll keep watching just because you got all the stars I like, but I know this isn't going to last very long.
Yeah, that was the major problem with that was you put 80% of your roster in NWO groups.
Yeah.
So who do you have left to trot out there? Norman Smiley and William Regal? And that's it. Those are the only two guys not in a group.
Yeah, and it did seem like that. Hell, any big star ended up joining one of those groups for some reason, and I don't know what the point was. There had to be a point where WCW won because that was the brand. NWO was its own separate entity, but it wasn't the brand. But yeah, that's where I'd say let's kill that. And start anew. I say get rid of the NWO and let Nash and Goldberg have a real match without a cow prod and see what happens.
Cow prod.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I can go back and go, why? But I think that was the start of the why.
Yeah. Well, and another thing I was thinking of, and this would be my second one, I guess, and it's kind of on the WCW theme. This may turn into more of that than we thought. But,
which is fine. We've got plenty of time. We can go hit the other feds another time.
Yeah. Well, the one I was thinking of that if you could go back in time and change, and that would be not to tell your viewers to turn over because Mankind, Mick Foley, is getting crowned the heavyweight champ.
Yeah.
You know, especially viewers of WCW who have watched Cactus Jack for numerous years.
Yep.
And knew him well, and half your audience goes flip. You know, no,
that'll put butts in the seat.
Don't do that. It was funny a couple times when you announced, different winners, but it didn't mean anything because it was just a filler match. That was funny. I remember when they did that the first time, and I laughed. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're actually giving out the outcomes. That's hilarious. But to announce a heavyweight title change on regular television, not pay-per-view, what did you think was going to happen?
I know.
And I was one of them that went, oh, I better change the channel.
I did too. You know what? I did too. I'm like, you're kidding, really? I want to see this. Yeah, and I think most people did. It backfired on them very badly, but it's just another one of those what the hell moments from a program that was really doing great, and then all of a sudden it was like somebody just threw a wrench inside the car and it just started crashing and blowing up.
Yeah, that's where you get a little too smart for your own good.
Yes,
and gonna poke the bear one more time, and it comes back to bite you.
All right. Well, as we talked, we'll save more of these for later because this is actually kind of a fun exercise just to kind of go back and forth the different things and what ifs. But
it really opens Pandora's box.
Well, and like you said, as we were talking earlier, I was thinking we're going to jump back and forth. And the more we keep talking, it was mostly focusing on a certain about 2.5 year window of WCW. So that's going to do it for our look at what we would change. It kind of ended up being more about a 2.5 year window in WCW, but we haven't done it for a couple weeks. But we ought to hit the hot tags, Tom.
Oh yeah, time for hot tags. I can't wait.
By God, it's a hot tag!
All right, man. I'll start first. Big Cass.
Oh, Big Cass. I don't care. I mean, yeah, he's off TV because of the leg injury. Comes back. Apparently beats up a little person he wasn't supposed to beat up, went directly against Vince's orders not to punch the guy, and did it anyways. Not a smart move, especially when you've only been on the main roster, 2 years, maybe a year and a half without the injury.
Yeah.
I'm just not, I'm not sold. And now that your little buddy, the Italian mouthpiece, is gone, I don't know. I really don't. I have no interest in a feud with him and Daniel Bryan. I think you're just wasting Daniel Bryan.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it.
Yep. 7 feet tall and no charisma. I don't care.
And you can't teach that.
And you're right about that. Tell me your thoughts on the B team.
I am a proud supporter of the B team. I think they're hilarious. They serve their time with the Miz, just kind of always in the background, didn't do much, interfered when they were called upon, and now they pretty much said, all right, boys, here's your chance to do something on your own. And they have not disappointed. I haven't been disappointed. I mean, they finally got a little bit of a push.
Yep.
And they now get a tag title match with Bray and Matt Hardy, and whether they win or not, I don't look for them to win the tag titles. But tell you what, that's been the one bright spot when they've been on. I've caught myself cracking up when they come rolling down the chair together down the ramp. I was cracking up, and they may not be trying to be comic relief for the show, but they're entertaining, and that's what that show needs.
Well, and you know what, I am very happy to see that they're two probably of the better workers in the company. I mean, Kurt Hennig's son, he's worked with The Rock. Anyone that comes in needs training. He's the guy that's working with them because they trust him that much. And the poor guy, no matter what, they can't seem to figure out how to get this guy over. I mean, hell, he had Paul Heyman as a Paul Heyman guy and he couldn't get over.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
If you remember, he had more of a run as McGillicuddy.
He did. Yeah.
Than he has
as
now.
Axel. Yeah. But that's what I'm kind of glad to see, is that being with The Miz was able for these two guys to find themselves. And I like that WWE had enough guts to say, you know what? Let's see if these guys can continue what they're doing, but by themselves. And so far, I got to give them credit because they're doing it. And I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind setting the table. They could even win the titles. I don't care. But you know what? Give them a little time, and I wouldn't mind seeing them reunite with Miz maybe by next year when they do another draft or something for SmackDown and Raw, because you've given them a year to establish themselves by themselves and give more credit to them as being the bodyguards and the helpers of the Miz. And then when you put them with the Miz, they're a little more legitimate to me.
No, I agree. I've enjoyed it the last few weeks. I'm going to give a thumbs up to the B team. Last question for Hot Tag. What do you think of the way they're trying to promote the NWA heavyweight title?
You know what? I like it because that title has so much history. And unfortunately, there was about a 20-year run when it split, when WCW became WCW and they quit using the NWA heavyweight title. Kind of got lost in the shuffle as the territories went away. There were a few NWA places around there. And I mean, in the early 2000s, I talked with Howard Brody. He was the president of the NWA and how they were trying to revitalize it. And I even talked with Scrap Iron Adam Pearce out of Green Bay when he was there. He was the NWA champion for a while. So,
right.
But most people didn't know that. They had no idea who these people were. And it's nice to see that Billy Corgan has a plan. He's not trying to make a whole NWA show. He's taking this belt and he's trying to rebuild it so people know what that belt stands for, where its history is. And I think being part of the All In show is an incredible get for those guys. You know, I love what they're doing.
Yeah, I like what they're doing too. I thought it was an original idea, you know, without having a way to promote your product.
Yeah.
And I like that it crosses other factions. So yeah, there's the All-In event they're going to do it at. They go to all these indies and promote it there. I just like the whole idea behind it, because that kind of gets back to the root of how wrestling got started to begin with in this country.
Oh yeah. And you know what? You get to see some pretty interesting matches. I mean, Tommy Dreamer got to wrestle for the title at his Hardcore Heaven shows. You get to see folks that you never would have thought have a chance. I mean, Cody Rhodes, if he wins that belt, that's the only father-son to ever hold the NWA title.
Now, there's a pretty cool little trivia fact.
Yeah. I mean, there's been brothers. I mean, the Funk's the first ones that come to mind, but
sure,
a father and son has never held that belt.
That would be something, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing that. I don't think, you know, if he wins it, I don't think they'll let him keep it very long, but it'd be something to see.
It would propel what he's doing even more so, though. But there we go, man. That's our hot tag. Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll be back next week. And a reminder, subscribe. Go to undertheringreport.com and subscribe to the show. It helps us out, keeps you guys up to date on everything we've got going on. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook. We've always got something, whatever Tom decides to find, dug up on the internet.
I seem to be the go-to person for some of that stuff.
You've been killing it lately, man. I got to give you credit there. But anyway, thanks a lot for joining us for this week's Under the Ring Report.
You're listening to Under the Ring Report with Bad Barry Horowitz, and if you're not listening, you're going to get stretched and beat up.
Follow the Under the Ring Report on Twitter at UTRR Podcast. You can subscribe to the Under the Ring Report on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher, or visit undertheringreport.com. Thanks for listening to the Under the Ring Report.